All right, well, I'll get started, and I'm guessing some folks, I think a couple people let me know they couldn't join, so I will just again say welcome everyone. This is the Building Level Advisory Committee, and we have not met for some time, so it's kind of a, do you remember, Superintendent? I think it was
April
back in 28th. Spring. Thank you. April was our last meeting. My name's Aura Russell-Better, and I'm the District 4 school board member, and I'm chairing this committee, gratefully chairing this committee. So we have representatives on this committee representing the communities of the 3 schools that are continuing to be renovated, Reiki, Longfellow, and Presumpscot. So I think before, we can just wait and see if some more folks join, but I would love it if, especially since we haven't been together for quite some time, if staff wouldn't mind introducing themselves, and then the members of the committee just to say hello and remind us just your name and the school community that you're connected through, or just, a sentence or two about your involvement would be great. So I don't know if you want to start, Superintendent, and go down the...
Happily. My name is Javier Botana. I'm Superintendent of the Portland Public Schools. And maybe, Steve, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Steve Stolfman, Portland Public Schools Facilities Director. I'll pass it off to our architect principal, Mr. Mark Lee.
I am Mark Lee. I'm an architect with Harriman. And I also, for staff, we have Terry Young as well. So I'm going to pass it back over to him, and then he can maybe pass it to Emily Waugh.
Okay. Hi, I'm Terry Young. I'm the Executive Director of Operations for the Portland Public Schools, which is a new role for me this year. So I'll pass it to Emily Hurley.
Terry. Thank you. I am Emily Hurley. I work at Presumpscot School as a literacy coach. I am also a parent at Reiki School, and I will pass it to the other Emily.
Hello, I am Emily Waugh. I'm also with Harriman. Laura, did you introduce yourself yet?
Sure. I'm Laura Jolly with CHA, and we're the owner's project manager in the 3 schools. How about I pass it to the other Laura?
Hi, my name is Laura Fries. My children go to Presumpscot, and I'm going to pass it off to Elizabeth LaPierre.
Hi, I'm Liz LaPierre, and I'm also a parent of a Presumpscot student and now Lyman Moore student.
Sarah, do you want to go?
Sure, I'm Sarah. I'm also a parent for 2 kids at Presumpscot.
All right, thanks everybody, and welcome Terry. I'm so glad that you're joining us. So, and practicing your title as you introduce yourself. That's great. So yeah, I think sometimes getting folks in summer to meetings is tough. So I appreciate everybody joining. And I know that Matt Peters said he would come on later, and I'm hoping some other folks will just join when they're able. So I know we have an agenda that maybe some of you got a chance to peek at. This is really kind of a review. I mean, we really haven't met for a good 4 months, so lots of progress happening, and I think some of you probably have seen in different school communities. I mean, I certainly get really excited going by Presumpscot as often as I can. I did go by Reiki the other day because I really wanted to get a peek, even though Reiki and Longfellow are really more inside the buildings. A lot is changing. I think Presumpscot you can kind of see some more just in going by outside the changes. So we're excited to just kind of give an overview of where things are. progress being made. We get to also see really see the finished product from LISA. So I think that will be really great for us to see just kind of how that building has been transformed, and then the excitement of each of our 3 remaining buildings to really get to that point of students and staff being able to really get to live and appreciate the work that's gone into these buildings to make them really 21st century learning spaces. So excited to have everybody here. We'll have chance for everyone to ask questions or get more info about things that you want to dive into a little bit later in the presentation. So should I turn it over to you, Mark, or
I think,
Claire, do you want to
Laura, you should do minutes. Although I don't know if we have a quorum, but if we could just make sure that if anybody has questions on the minutes and we don't need to approve them, we can just come back to them at the next.
Okay, yeah, and actually, I don't know what the quorum would have to be for the group, so I'm glad you thought of that. So I'll just take some notes. All right.
Any questions on the minutes? They're attached to the agenda for the day. All right. Well, if there aren't any, I think, Aura did a great job of introducing what we're doing today. I think, as you know, it's been a while. So a big part of what we want to do today is update you on where we are, particularly with an eye to the fact that, teachers are back on Monday. And so where are we with, construction and certificates of occupancy and things along those lines today. And then we also are going to spend a little bit of time up front talking about, sharing pictures actually from the LISEF project, the completed LISEF project. Primarily because, it's the dog days of summer, it's the dog days of construction in particular. And so, a little bit of hope at the end of the rainbow, or whatever my mixed metaphor is there for, just that this is hard now, but it will pay off down the road. And so the good folks at Harriman spent some time this summer doing some finishing pictures of the project, and want to share those and then talk about the current status of construction. And then there is a major topic that we want to make sure that you're aware of. It's going to be on the board's agenda. It has been through the District Advisory Building Committee. So we just want to make sure that everybody at the building level also understands what we're asking the board to approve, why we're asking them for it, and have an opportunity to ask any questions that you have about, how it impacts the project, how it impacts the projects that we're here to really talk about. So, so that's our agenda for today. And with that, if you have no questions, and I'll pause for a second.
Javier, is it okay if just the wonderful administrators that hopped on could just say hello? And I see a lot of, there's a Charlie. I was like, I see a lot of Emily Hurley's. I think, okay. Yeah. Maybe Annie and Angie and Lori and Charlie, if you don't mind just saying hello.
Hi there. Thanks, Emily, for sharing the link. Something happened, but here we are. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a secret decoder ring we need for this meeting every single time, but I am in. I'm Angie Taylor, principal of Presumpscot.
And I'm Lori Babinski, lead teacher at Reiki.
Charlie Meringue, one of the lead teachers at Reiki.
Excellent.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. So with that, I think I'm turning it over to you, Mark.
Yeah, and Lisa has joined us as well. So you see her in one of the new squares, Hollywood Squares here. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here, I think this should work. And glad we all made time here this summer, one of our remaining summer evenings, to get an update. And as has been already mentioned, really the substance of our presentation is to give everyone an update on all the work that's been going on over the summer, and even a little bit before that. But and then the next piece of it is, as Superintendent Botana mentioned, there's a conversation on where we are with contingency spending, and that's the funds that we had in each project budget to pay for unforeseen conditions that came up during construction. So we'll have a fairly in-depth review of that, and that kind of feeds into a conversation that we've started on what is the budget for furnishings, fixtures, and equipment, what we refer to as FFE. And then just an update on next steps and timeline. And so our next slides are, let's try it in the other direction here, are really the fun slides that Lisa enjoys going through. So we'll give you a construction update, starting with the finished photos from Lisa.
I would say we both enjoy going through them.
We
I just
do.
have the
We do.
honor of sharing them. So thank you for that, Mark. As Javier said, this is definitely the time in construction and trying to get back into school. Trying to just keep the light at the end of the tunnel visible. And so no better way than to share the end result of LISA and really what it looked like before and what it looks like now. And these are the professional photos that we took over the summer and with Harriman staff and Harriman kiddos. So we could populate them so you can see how the spaces were envisioned to be utilized. So this is the before image of LISA, what it looked like before we started. And on the next slide, you can see the admin addition. And so this is the new face to Lyseth Elementary School, very playful with color and texture and different building forms. The next slide is what you used to see when you walked into Lyseth. So this was the old admin area where you checked in. So they now have a nice secure administration and vestibule. And now you walk into what we call either campfire space or watering hole where kiddos can gather and learn from one another, really celebrate the identity of their school when they come in and start to see that connection to nature that their design statement really emphasized. And so you have the skylight, the tiered seating, and then you start to see glimpses of the library beyond. This is that connector that takes you out to the library and gymnasium in between the two existing classroom wings, which divide the existing space between those classroom wings. And if you recall, there used to be a portable that sat right in this location. So now they have two secure outdoor learning environments on either side of this hallway and library. This is one of the courtyards. We refer to this as the kindergarten courtyard because it's between the library and the kindergarten. And we understand that the art teacher does take the students out there for plein air painting in art class, which is great. This is standing in front of the gymnasium looking back down that connector, and you can see the connection to outside as well as variety of spaces. This is one of them. We call it the nest space, where people can pull off and either celebrate students' work or connect and learn from one another or work individually with students or a small group. This is what the gym cafetorium, we'll call it, looked like before. And so what we're highlighting with this next picture is the separate gymnasium on the next slide that shows now you have a separate gym from your cafeteria, and we also have a stage off of the gymnasium. And again, you see that strong connection back out to the outdoors. This is what the library used to look like, and the library was converted into 2 classrooms, and an addition was made for the library. The next slide shows a bright and colorful library space with a variety of spaces for kids to learn and read, and also, again, emphasizing that connection back out to the natural elements. This is an image of what the corridors looked like at Lyseth before we started. You can see some exposed utilities and not as bright colors as we've come back with, and really trying to provide a space for the kiddos to pull off. You can see those desks and chairs in the hallway, and being a little bit more intentional in the renovation. And the next slide you will see we've created what we call classroom nodes, and these identify the different classroom communities. They also are a place for the kids to work one-on-one with adults, or again, small groups at that desk and seating area. And the green wall is actually a pin-up space to celebrate their work. This also helps the students understand where they are in the building through the use of color and graphics. And the graphics that were selected were to highlight native Maine vegetation. And an image of what a classroom looked like at LISA. And the next slide is an image of a renovated classroom. This happens to be the pre-K classroom with spaces to be able to sit on the floor, as well as play and work, as well as great connections out to the outdoors. So that was LISA. So it gives you a good understanding as to what it looked like and where it ended up. And it's really exciting to see how that turned out. And we know the staff and students are enjoying it. I'll pause there if there's any questions about that before we jump into the update of the current phases of construction at the 3 other schools. All right, not hearing or seeing anything, I will jump into Longfellow's update. So the Longfellow addition renovation project, we'll start with the 2-story addition, the start of installation of exterior dense glass. And for folks that don't know what that is, it's the sheathing that goes outside the studs, is going up on the 2-story addition. The elevator addition, they're prepping for flooring connections. This is where the elevator addition gets connected to the existing floors. Phase 3, final finishes, flooring, and touch-up are occurring. In Phase 4A, summer work, abatement complete, framing of the spaces, electrical, plumbing, rough ends, informing for the concrete ramp and stair at the new main entrance, and the CMP to start the new transformer. And so if folks probably don't remember the areas we were working on, unless you're in the school, that was really the main corridor. We're renovating a lot of interior spaces for OT, PT, principal office, admin, and a variety of other spaces as well. And then Phase 4B is the kindergarten wing, and the final abatement for summer will be complete this week. And the city inspection is scheduled for the 26th. They will be out on site sometime between 9 and noon tomorrow. On the pictures, you can see various areas of the addition renovation that are taking place. And I'll walk you through them to give you a little bit more context. The upper left picture is the 2-story addition out back. You can see that sheathing or dense glass going out up on the studs. You can see the formed concrete for the steps out back. And the upper right image is the nurse's room with flooring and casework installed. The lower left image, there's a new ramp and stair going to the near the parking lot, adjacent to the parking lot and that entrance. They're installing the forms for the new north entry ramp and footings. And it's actually a little bit further along than what this picture happens. Things are changing rapidly. And the OTPT room is nearly complete, and that's the lower right-hand corner. Any questions on Longfellow before we move to the next school? Okay. So Reiki. Summer work and big picture was renovating several spaces into classrooms with walls and doors and ceilings. For those that remember, there was exposed concrete for the ceiling throughout the school, and there were partitions and no walls and doors. The other area that was undertaken this summer is the center space. The renovation's happening in that area where the library is. So Phase 2, the classroom construction is nearly complete, and actually we have certificate of occupancy as of August 10th. Phase 3, concrete slabs completed, framing and rough ends are ongoing. Drywall is hung, and the estimated certificate of occupancy is by August 25th. the pictures of the Reiki addition. You can see that admin addition in the upper left-hand corner, installing the fascia metal on the front canopy. So that will be the new main entry, clearly identified through the canopy and the addition out front. And the upper right is a nearly complete classroom with casework, flooring, ceilings, lights, and teaching area. The lower left is the tube steel set for what we call pony walls. They're small partial height walls at the stairs. So work is ongoing there. And then one side of the library with sheetrock ongoing, and it's further along since this picture has been taken. But that's showing the sheetrock in that open space in the center. Any questions on Reiki?
Do you want to talk about the two-tone floors real quick?
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. So let's go back to the last slide because it's really evident in that. You see that red floor and that gray floor. And then the other in Reiki, it's a light gray and a dark gray. And the reason that we have this angle across the room is what we do is it's a safety and security measure. And so when you are standing at the corridor looking into the classroom through the glazing, we look at, when we're in the model designing this, we look at where we can see in the classroom and where we cannot. And the areas that are not visible, we draw that line between the two, and the areas that are not visible get a different color tile. And the reason we do that is in the event of a lockdown, kids want to get out of the line of sight. And so it's an easy way to be able to instruct students to essentially get on the dark gray tiles or the red tiles so that they know that they're out of the line of sight.
Just a quick question from Reiki. The kindergarten rooms have this two-tone floor, but there's also doors and windows that are not, because it's on the first floor and there's actually doors on the outside. The flooring doesn't actually, I guess my question is, the flooring didn't make sense to me, but now I'm wondering, is it just if I'm at the doorway looking in?
Correct. It's from a corridor.
Okay.
Lori has a question. Go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, just a certificate of occupancy. Today's the 25th. I think that's changed, correct?
Correct. I think it's early next week. Maybe Laura might be up to date on exactly. I hadn't been in and out of the office today.
It has changed to Tuesday next week.
Yeah. Any other questions on Reiki? Okay, on to Presumpscot. So Presumpscot, installing interior framing, rough-in for plumbing and electricals underway. So I'll back up just a minute. The major work that happened at Presumpscot this summer was the interior renovations in the existing building and getting sprinklers up and running in that building. The work continued on the addition, but that was the priority. The work that had been continuing and is being brought to closures, installing interior wood blocking and duct work, installing exterior wall insulation, brick ties, and masonry flashing. That is more on the additions, both the front and the back. Laying brick or upper roof walls. And so what that is any of those walls that essentially go above the roof, those are called upper roof walls. And most of those are complete. Installing tile in the boys' bathroom, installing clock, speaker, and data cabling in Area A. And Area A is the existing building. Installing security door access cabling. Foundation waterproofing and insulation is complete. That's mostly in the front addition. Presumpscot does not need a certificate of occupancy for this phase, but the city is to be inspecting. I think they were trying to come out today. Again, I was out of the office and I know there's some back and forth with some updated plans, so it may be early next week. I don't know, Laura, if that's changed.
They're coming on Monday.
Monday. Thank you, Angie.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was a little slow.
So in big picture, a lot of work has transpired this summer, and trying to get everything buttoned up to get everybody back in place. Any other? Oh, I'll go through the pictures. I apologize. The upper left picture is a view of the installed new roofing on the addition. The upper right is boys' toilet fixtures being installed. Lower left is view of new brick on upper roof wall. And the lower right is whiteboards installed in the 5th grade classroom. And lots of other things are happening over there as well. Any other questions or comments on the Presumpscot School?
I know that the open house that was scheduled for Thursday night had to be canceled / postponed. What in the construction timeline is causing that to happen?
Do you want to answer that, Lisa, or do you want me to?
You can, or I can, whatever you would like.
I'm only asking Angie because I've had other parents asking me, so.
Yeah, that's fine. It's the sprinkler system that's currently being installed. They need the city to come and do an inspection. That's part of it. Also, they have to come in and inspect because they have to put a wall because of the roof. So they had to make some changes in the roof. And because of that, they have to build a wall so that we cannot enter that part of the building. And that part will not be done until the end of next week. So we can't have, teachers can go into the building. So it says that we can occupy our building, but teachers can. Students and parents cannot until the city signs off on that. That's why. And I'm not putting that detail out, Lisa, because it changes there's so much has changed just in the past week that I literally would be making an announcement daily, which I'm doing to the staff and faculty right now, which is probably driving them insane. But I'm not going to drive the parents insane in that way, because I don't think that's healthy for our community. Lisa, did I step on your words? You're going to say that's correct?
No, you're fine. I agree with what you said.
And so is the sprinkler system new sprinkler system or updated sprinkler system?
So it's an updated sprinkler system. My understanding is when they first had it inspected, something happened with the water that caused it to be contaminated. So therefore they had to flush the water system out, and they had to come back and test it again, or test it. It did not meet the test this last time. So therefore they're coming back on Monday to test that water again. The hope is, and everyone feels confident, that it will pass on Monday. But if it doesn't pass on Monday, then the teachers will not be in the building until later.
Okay. And you mentioned the roofing. Is that the new roofing on the addition?
Yes. It's just it has to do with the old roofing. The way it was installed before was not proper. So therefore they had to make changes to that roofing, which means that they have to build a wall so it's watertight. Again, so that we can go back in the building, right? Because we would not be able to go back in the building with the way the roof is right now. Yeah. So that's why. And Lisa, to correct me in anything I'm getting wrong, or anyone if I'm getting stuff wrong.
No, Angie, you're not getting anything wrong. But the roof was 40 years ago re-roofed, and when they re-roofed it, they cut through the deck, which was exposed when we put the new upper walls in. So structurally, it had to be changed of how we redeck it. So it was an unforeseen condition until we pull the roof off. The water main supplies a lateral line to the school, which was 80 years old. They were digging a trench next to it to run the new sprinkler line. So it is a new sprinkler system. The domestic supply split. So it had a hole in it and it sucked in some dirt. So the water district requires us to sanitize that line, flush it, let it sit for 24 hours, and then let it sit with fresh water in it for 24 hours, do a test, and then we turn the water on to the sprinkler system. So we have a fully charged system, and that then lends to the inspection from the city.
And so teachers cannot be in the building because if there was a fire, there would be no sprinklers. That's the reason for the delay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just have one more question. Sorry to be asking them. Lisa, you mentioned the different colored tiles in the classrooms, is that something that's happening in all classrooms or just new build / renovated classrooms?
That is happening new build and renovated classrooms.
Okay, so like the new kindergarten and pre-K classrooms at Presumscott will have that, but none
Correct.
of the other classrooms will?
Correct. And so what the intent is that we give, there's a design standard. So as you guys replace the tiles with capital improvement projects going forward, you have the same approach that you can carry out throughout the school. And that's what we did at LISEP as well.
Okay, what about that 5th grade classroom that's being renovated at Presumscott at the end of the hallway? Will that have the different colored tiles or no?
I'm pretty certain that it does. I'd have to look back at the drawings to remember, but I'm pretty certain all the new ones and renovated ones do.
Okay, super. Thank you so much.
Yep. Great questions. Any other questions on the update? All right. Pass it back over to Mark.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. And as we go forward, we'll make sure we pause for questions in this section too. So this is a less exciting section because it's not very visual. But it has to do with the second topic we wanted to cover, which is the contingency cost summary. And the contingencies are a budget line item for just that, for contingencies that come up, or a contingency plan that comes up if we find unforeseen conditions, such as has already been described in some of our dialogue, the idea that the water line, the roof, things like that, that are unforeseen when we began our work on the design. And so the original amounts that we established for Presumscott were at the time of the bid that we received from the contractor, and it's 5% of the contract amount. So that amount for Presumscott is $729,645 we started with. To date, as of when we pulled this presentation together, we had spent $233,000 of it. So we had, at this point in time, about $500,000 of unspent contingency. We are about 32%, or we've spent about 32% of that. So that $233,000 is about 32% of the original $729,000 budget line that we had. So we've spent about a third of it. We are at the time of this, it was 44% complete. It's actually ticked up quite a bit in even the last month here. So we are nearing the halfway point in terms of the amount of work that's happened on site. And so looking at how much we've spent and how long we have to go for construction, we did some math, and at this rate of spending, we'll have spent another $141,000 for the remaining half of the project. And so that will mean that we will have spent about $350,000 of the $729,000 if we go, and this is an approximation, but if we go at the same rate of finding unforeseen things and addressing those with our contingency funds, we will roughly have spent about half of our contingency, a little bit less than half of the contingency amount. So there will be a surplus for that. So I'll pause for a moment if all that made sense.
Marcus?
Nope, Laura, go ahead.
Oh, I'll be quick, Laura. I just wanted to be sure when we were just discussing the sprinkler, maybe that didn't have cost, but I'm assuming the roof issue that Lisa mentioned, so was that already included in the contingency spent to date and pending?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Laura. This does not include that one. That was, again, something relatively recent that popped up,
Okay.
and so it hasn't been incorporated in these numbers yet.
So we don't even actually know what that amount is going to be yet?
Right, we don't know the
Okay.
full amount. We've come up with a solution to fix it, and the contractor's working hard to make sure that we don't lose time on the schedule as well.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it would be coming out of that projected contingency needed that you have.
That's right.
Second.
The remaining, you mean, Superintendent, the remaining uncommitted?
Projected remaining contingency, correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Laura.
No, so I was just curious, if we do end up with a surplus, what happens with that money?
Well, that's a good question, Laura. We're going to talk about how this plays forward, not just with Presumpscot, but with the other projects as well, and see how that surplus is part of the overall project budgets for all three schools. Good question. All right, I'll move next to Reiki. So Reiki, we had the same percentage of 5% of the bid that we held aside for that contingency budget. And to date, we've spent $130,000 of that 584. And so that right now, the uncommitted, I say right now, again, this is at a point in time that we put the slides together. We had $453,000 of unspent contingency. So we've used about 22% of that $584,000, and we are approximately 38% through the project. And so if we were to continue at this rate, we would need another $68,000 to complete the project. Now, realize we've got 18 months, so this is a much longer duration we have left of Reiki than we do of Presumpscot. And but we've also are at a very low spend rate on changes at Reiki. And so if we continue on this path, we would have $385,000 of surplus. So that would be the unspent of the $584,000.
Quick question. Where does the furniture money come from?
That's an excellent question. And we will address that in a few slides. Okay, so those are the conditions at both Presumpscot and Reiki. We have a different scenario happening at Longfellow, and we'll explain a little bit more of the reason that it's a different condition there. So we did, again, a 5% of the bid at Longfellow. That was $554,000. And to date, we'd spent $489,000. So we've spent 88% of the contingency, and we still have, a significant 18 months left of the project. And so at this particular rate of expenditure, we will actually, instead of having a surplus at Longfellow, we'll actually have a deficit at Longfellow. And our projected deficit at this point is about $400,000. So we will exceed the $554,000 by about $400,000. And we'll explain a little bit more of that in a minute here. So that is a challenge because we need to fund, the contractor comes up with these items, we can't stop work and not address them. We need to continually address these unforeseen issues that pop up. And so we have to figure out how we're going to find funds to address those. The next aspect is, first I'll go through the how we got to this point of the expenditure, and then we can talk about how do we address the funding of the contingency funds, our budget line item, when we go over it. So the first change order was right early on in the project. It was September 2021. So we had the contract had been mobilized for I think about a month and a half at that point. And the items that they uncovered that were unforeseen are identified with the bullet points, but a couple of them that really were most of the cost of this first change order of $221,000. So that was a big change right out of the gate for unforeseen conditions. And now some of that was unsuitable soils. And there's a picture in the lower left-hand corner. When we put new foundations in, there's a requirement for the stability of the soil. And if the soil is not suitable, if it's unsuitable, then we have to dig it out and replace it with suitable soils. And so, and there is a fairly significant amount of money for that item. The other rule large item on this one had to do with the quarters. The quarters, as we started opening things up and uncovered the way that the existing walls terminated to the underside of the floor above. This was on the first floor, and we looked at how they terminated. What we needed to do is create a barrier between the construction activity and the rest of the school that would be occupied during the school year. And that enclosure to separate the two, the existing walls were okay, where you can see them, but we needed to put a rated ceiling in, and so that the corridor itself is a safe passage between, or barrier between the areas that they're doing construction, but also it's a safe place for egress from the building itself. That ceiling looks like, in the upper left-hand corner, looks like a standard ceiling, but it's actually a 1 hour rated lay-in ceiling, and it has clips that hold the panels into the grid. And in addition to that, we also had to look at a way of lighting the corridor that would not impair the 1 hour UL label of the ceiling system. And so we ended up devising a system where we have those metal stud framing members that are spanning across the walls with a light suspended on them. And so both that ceiling and the lights was a very significant cost right out of the gate to make sure that the building was safe for students to begin last year at this time. The other items that are shown in the picture, we had some additional site work for the portables. We had to install some utilities, and so that included some costs for some site work. And then we also relocated the electrical service to the building, which you can see the electrical room and the switchgear located down the lower right-hand picture. So those were some additional costs that we encountered early on. I'll pause for a second before moving to the next change order. The next one is the second change order that we paid out in December of 2021. And there was some additional cost to the corridor and vestibule changes. And that corridor and vestibule changes were had to do with the permanent rating that would be in place once the work in this area was done. So early on, we had conversations with the city, and the condition right now is that the interior stairs that go from the second story down to the first story, they empty out into the hallway. Well, the new code says they have to empty directly to the outside, and so we actually had to create a continuity of a rated enclosure so that the stairs would come down and empty directly to the outside. So that was additional rating of ceilings and vestibule that had to be done for that. The other part was we had some abatement at the lower level in addition to what we had identified in the documents. And so there were some additional costs for that. The total changes for the change order number 2 were $79,000. So that, in addition to the $221,000, we're already at $300,000, and we're approximately about 4 months into the construction. Change order number 3 was in February 2022 this year, and we had a new unit ventilator that we needed to install to replace in room 112B. We had some infill at some of the removals of chalkboards, and then we had electrical panel relocations, and then there's bar joists which had to be inserted to reinforce the roof, and you can see those in the upper left-hand corner in room 108. That amounted to $37,000, and so the amount you can see is starting to normalize a little bit after we've get going into the construction itself. Change order number 4 was also in February. That was $20,000, and that was for changes to the lower level bathroom and some electrical panel feeders, and pictures of those are shown in the lower 2 images. Change order number 6 was in May of this year. And that included some fire dampers that were required at some ductwork penetrations through rated walls. We had some fire alarm devices that we had to install in the crawl space. And then we had temporary rated ceiling in a corridor similar to what we had to install in the first floor. We have that in other locations of the building as we move through the construction itself in different areas of the building. So that was $27,000 in May. And then more recently, at the end of July, we signed the change order for $24,000. And that was another revised bathroom layout. We had to add a urinal and change a few items in the layout of the bathroom. You can see that down in the lower right-hand corner. We had some additional casework that we installed in the art room, and we had some coordination with the elevator door at the lower level. And you can see where we cut through the concrete retaining wall to get access to the elevator shaft. You can see the elevator shaft beyond that opening in that lower left picture. The reason we didn't show number 5 is number 5 was the change order that settled the delay claims and the additional scope that was new work through our obtaining the permit from the city. There it is. And that was part of a conversation that we had with everyone back in the spring of this year. So a summary of all 3 projects and where that puts us are uncommitted funds at Longfellow, Reiki, and Presumpscot. The total amount that we have not spent right now is $1 million. The total that we are projecting that we will need for all 3 projects is $680. That includes the deficit at Longfellow and the surplus at Reiki and Presumpscot. So the balance of those is a surplus projected right now of about $330,000. So, but that looks at all 3 schools together. And so the earlier conversations were, how does this impact some of the other items in the project budgets? And so we'll take a look at that. But right now, the big issue right now is how do we keep the Longfellow contingency fund at a level that we can address some of the unforeseen conditions that we continue to encounter there. So the only 2 items that we had talked about when we were settling the delay claims that we haven't encumbered yet were the FFE and these contingency funds. And we said that we didn't want to touch the contingency funds because we knew we were going to need some of those funds. And so we settled some of the new work and delay claims with the funds that were in the FFE. And we started with the combined value of $2.2 million in all 3 school projects for FFE. We used $837,000 for Reiki new work and delay claims, and we used another $170,000 for the Presumpscot new work and delay claims. And that left us with about $1.2 million. At the time, we also talked about the fact that with the model of funding FFE at LICEF, we used right around, I think it's half the money that half the budget that we originally had established for FFE at LICEF. And so that's, and the issue here is you don't see is Longfellow. Longfellow's new work, that change order number 5 was paid for out of the surplus from the LICEF budget. So that was used to cover the new work and delay claims at Longfellow, which is why it's not identified in the top figure. At the rate that we talked about, that if we are online to turn over that $333,000 of unspent contingencies, we'll fund that back to the FFE funds. And again, so that would give us $1.5 million for all 3 schools. I'll pause for a moment if there are any questions on this slide. I think Elizabeth has a hand raised.
Hi. I just have a couple of questions, actually, maybe a couple of slides back.
Sure.
And just kind of an overall question. So generally speaking, it sounds like these numbers are not very stale, but somewhat stale, especially since Presumpscott's roofing issue came to light. And I know that you made projections about how much would need to be spent out of the contingencies till the end of the completion of all 3 schools. But right now, do you have any sense, just things that have changed over the course of when you made these slides and now, and things that are coming up, whether or not this is on target?
Yeah, and they're not significantly outdated. So I will say that it's not like we're looking at figures from 3 months ago.
Okay.
And when we put these together, we looked at what we knew would need to be addressed, but we didn't actually have the final paperwork signed yet on them. So a lot of them were, but no, the roofing, for instance, was not included in that. I don't know, Laura and Lisa, if we have a projected order of magnitude for what the roofing is yet.
We don't know. Yeah, and just to answer the question, I think also a little bit from my perspective, I think, the projections were based on our burn rates or what we spend each month, and then we carry it forward. And so it's an estimate. It's our best that we can do based on historical data. But Presumpscott will obviously change to some degree with the most recent findings.
And are burn rates usually higher at towards more like the first half of the construction project? Usually, you're like digging up things and discovering.
Yeah, I think it can be. Although, while we know existing conditions that we've run into on Longfellow and Reiki, we'll still continue to run into some of those same issues as we go forward. But certainly there were things that happened at the beginning that won't happen at the rest of the project.
And I also have a question regarding, if you wouldn't mind going back to the slide from Longfellow, the one right before this. Yeah. So with change orders, like the sewer issue and the soil issue, I understand those. What I don't completely understand are things like added casework in the art room and revising the bathroom layout. Like how do those get generated? Because that seems more like someone wanted something a little bit different, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. The added casework in the art room, I think, had to do with addressing an issue that we identified with what we had for sinks, for instance, in there. So it was the idea of putting casework in to address something. So it wasn't just because somebody decided, oh, we want more cabinets in here. It does address an unforeseen or a condition that we came up with that was needed some way of addressing it. And same thing with the toilet room layouts. It may be that we encountered a chase that we needed to then accommodate a geometry in a room, and so we had to shift some things around that way. So most of those changes that you see that aren't that sort of straightforward, there's always some reason that it deviates from it. And I think I can clearly say for Steve and company, they've been watching very, very carefully to make sure we're not tapping into the contingencies unless we absolutely need to.
Okay.
Very true. And what I found interesting to your question, when you look at the slide where it shows unsuitable soils in the parking lot of Longfellow, right there, that's where the modulars were going to go. Years ago, many, many years ago, there was some kind of a house there, and it was kind of caved in on itself and was sort of like a landfill. So all of those soils in there, and there was fuel from maybe 100 years ago when there was some kind of action going on there. And what did the city look like back then? So standing there looking into that pile, we couldn't compact it and build on it. So it all had to be removed, which they didn't do back in those days, and put in new soils. But I think that's what I'm looking for, is the slide and ratio of, we're not digging as much, we're into new construction, we're not tearing roofs off of Presumpscot, we're getting into cleaner, newer construction. Our risk to seeing unforeseens are minimal, or reducing to normal construction finds. And we are very conservative with the approach on change orders.
And I think, at least for me, the concern in the back of my mind has always been like, what if we just completely run out of money? What's going to happen then? So that's that concern is kind of underlying a lot of these questions. But your answers have made me feel a lot better about that. And it doesn't look like we will run out of money at this point.
No, yeah.
Just from a completely layperson's perspective.
Correct. We're fairly comfortable. Again, what the question is right now is exactly what we'll have for funds for the FFE. That's the one flexible pot that we have to be able to borrow against to pay for contingencies if we need to. So,
Emily, do you want to go ahead? Question or comment?
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the abatement, because I do know that from the beginning, we were aware that Longfellow did have some asbestos and was going to be needed to be removed. And like all old buildings, you don't really understand what is in the wall until you open it up. I'm just wondering if this is the same situation as what Steve just referred to, that like there's not too many more walls to open up. Is that accurate, or is that potential for future costs as well?
Yeah, I think this was at the lower level, and right now there isn't a lot of work left in that area. So we are moving up through the rest of the building with the next phases, and fairly comfortable with exactly what we're going to encounter, because we've already been encountering it in several of the areas that we've already renovated. So I don't expect that we're going to find any surprises there. In that aspect of diminishing surprises, definitely as we really move towards new construction at Longfellow and Reiki, we have phased construction, so we're encountering conditions that potentially could surprise us, but we have a fairly good understanding of what we're going to find based on what we've already done. But that's not to say we won't have changes. So where we were at this point was looking at borrowing from or shifting funds from Presumpscot and Reiki, their surpluses that we were projecting there, to fund the deficit that we were going to need at Longfellow. So that's the first aspect that we're looking at to cover the deficit that we're seeing at Longfellow. And so what we have been recommending is that the $406,000 that we're going to need for Longfellow, that we project that we're going to need for Longfellow, that we would prorate the amount that we would take from each of the surpluses in the order of magnitude of how large the projects were. So that is to say that Presumpscot is a larger construction budget and a larger contingency. And we would then take a little bit more from that than we would from the Reiki, because it was a smaller construction project. So we're just trying to equalize them to the size of the contingencies that those two schools started with, as we looked at shifting funds to cover the Longfellow deficit. And we put a little slide together. So this explains that the 406 is needed for Longfellow. And if we looked at the total of the Reiki contingency and Presumpscot contingency amounts that are listed there, the Reiki contingency amount is about 44% of that total, and the Presumpscot is about 56% of that total of those two. Again, just to come up with that ratio of how we would borrow. And so that 44% of the 406,000 would come from the Longfellow, and this 56% would come from the Reiki contingency line item. And so so we move 178,000 from the Reiki contingency line item to the Longfellow, and it would move 227 from the Presumpscot to the Longfellow contingency line item to cover the unforeseen conditions that we still may encounter at Longfellow. And
just to remind people, how much do we estimate we need at Reiki, and how much do we estimate we need at Presumpscot?
Exactly. And so that, I'll go back to
slide 31.
There we go. Thank you, Javier. Whoops. Okay. Oh, I think they have changed here. Let me go back. I think it's this slide. Oops. So what we think we will need for Reiki to continue the project is $68,000 at looking at that projected burn rate. So of that amount that we said we're going to borrow from, that still leaves us with a surplus from Reiki. So we still have plenty of contingency at Reiki to finish, even after shifting funds to Longfellow. And likewise, going back just to Presumpscot, we projected that we would have, we were going to need another 141,000 to complete Presumpscot, and so that would still leave us with 354,000. So we're going to borrow from that 354 to get to make up some of the difference for Longfellow. So even after borrowing those to cover Longfellow, we still think we're going to have that 333,000 left to move back to FFE. This is it describes it.
Mark, with the roofing costs at Presumpscot, if those numbers haven't been included in some of these numbers, how will that impact what's left over?
Yeah, it's a good question, Laura. And again, part of it, this is just a mathematical calculation, but that will dig into that 141,000 that we have. The question is, how much is it going to be? And then the issue is, after we get through this summer, a lot of our work is just in the entrance addition and in the back new addition. And there's very little new or unforeseen conditions to uncover, because we're out of the ground, we're enclosing the building, and we're now starting to put all the pieces back in place on that day. And so there's less chance. So we actually would suspect that our burn rate would diminish as we move forward on the new work. So it's a little too early to tell. We'll know a little bit more because we only have about 5 months left on the project, 4.5, 5 months left on the project.
Okay. And is that timeline still looking like after winter break?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit after that. Laura, exactly the completion date right now anticipated for
end of December.
Okay, so we're looking at the end of the year then still.
Okay, thank you.
And Mark, can I just add, but you'll know it really kind of by mid-October if there's any other cost with that roof, right? Because that should be done by mid-October. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's correct.
So even sooner than what you're saying, 4 months.
Yeah, exactly. We'll know, again, we'll have a much better picture this, every month that we get closer to that December deadline, we have a much stronger sense of exactly how much of the contingency we're going to touch at Presumpscot.
Go ahead, Liz.
I may be getting ahead a little bit, but what is the net loss for the FFE, and what is the practical impact of that loss for each school?
Yeah, so this slide we touched on a little bit, but I'll go back through this again. When we established the budgets for the FFE for all 4 schools, we used a percentage. And the percentage that we used for the 3 schools amounts to $2.2 million for the Presumpscot, Reiki, and Longfellow schools. That was what we started with, and that's the same percentage that we originally ascribed to the Lyseth School Project 2. At Lyseth, we took a approach of funding new furniture for the new administration addition that we put on, and we had the new library, the new gym, and then we had also completely reconstructed the kindergarten wing. So those are the areas that we concentrated on with furniture at Lyseth, as well as some technology throughout the school. The amount that we spent at Lyseth was approximately half of what we had originally budgeted for FFE. So, and the rest of that contributed to the surplus of the Lyseth school project that also rolled back into the remainder of the schools. And we used that, as was mentioned, to fund some of the new work and delay claims going forward. So we didn't have to borrow against FFE of these school projects because we had some surplus from Lyseth. And that was a conversation that goes back to when we were paying out those delay claims. So right now, though, we did borrow, as shown here, we borrowed about $1 million to pay the delay claims. So we reduced it not quite by half, the FFE budget, but probably pretty darn close to that. And so if we were to use 1.3 million of the original 2.2 million, that's probably on par with what we spent at Lyseth to accommodate the FFE. And so right now, it looks like we'll be able to do a little better than that if we continue to spend the amounts that we have in contingency. So we'd be able to increase the amount for FFE to 1.5 between the 3 schools. Elizabeth, does that answer that question, or?
Yeah, I'm wondering at this point if there's any, significant impact for the schools. Is there just not going to be enough money to purchase things that we were anticipating purchases, like, tables and chairs and technology? And it sounds like maybe you overestimated what might be needed for FFE based on what you did at Lyseth. It was really only half of what you had budgeted. So this is over half of what you had budgeted. So maybe we're going to be okay. Is that?
That's exactly kind of the scenario. Yeah. We don't anticipate replacing all furniture in all the schools, and that was never the intent.
Right.
And so absolutely, it's to address some of the new spaces, certainly, and some of the more acute or critical areas of furniture that needs to be replaced.
And that FF&E budget is not an overestimate. There is a formula that is used in these projects, correct? So can you explain that?
Yeah, we use the same percentage that the Department of Education uses when we devised these budgets. And so for new school construction, they split up the amount that they put into the FFE into furniture and technology, and it's a percentage. And I think right now their current percentages is 3% in each of those budgets of the projected construction cost. And so that's what we built the budgets from originally. Actually, it goes back even before we built the budgets to what Oak Point did when they established the BFOF budgets.
Great.
So yeah, it's an estimate.
But happily, where the actual need is well below what's estimated.
Well, that's going to get into the next slide after this.
Okay, thank you.
Emily's hand is up. I don't know if we want to take Emily's question first before we move on.
And
Sure,
I also saw Annie had her hand up. I'm just wondering, and I'm hoping that this is addressed in slides going forward, but so Lyseth was a new library that involves a great deal of furniture that's specific to that setting. Our school has new, pre-K kindergarten classrooms, so that's going to be kind of a specific. I'm wondering about Reiki in that every single classroom almost is being touched. I wonder if there is consideration and put into the plan in terms of how our children are interacting with these spaces, and the equity question of making sure that everybody gets what they need.
And thank you, Emily. And part of that, again, I think hopefully the slide that we get into on FFE will address how we're approaching that. There was another
yours,
question?
Annie, or did you want to go to?
I had the same exact question, so I'll wait until we see more.
All right, good. So the next slide addresses what's our process to move forward to really identify how we're going to expend the FFE funds. And so there's really probably a three-step process, really, but it kind of breaks down into these. The first one is we've got to go through and evaluate what the condition of the furniture is at all of your schools. And so we will go through and do a selected inventory. So it's just to understand what condition it is and where are the needs. So the piece is to understand what you have and then do a condition priority and needs assessment. Based on that, we'll come back to the DABC and to the BLAC with options to look at how do we address what we perceive as are those needs, either from new spaces or from the condition of the existing furniture. And so we will come forward and propose that. We will look at how we addressed LISEF and thinking about equity, not only about these three schools, but across all four schools. And so that's a dialogue that we will have discussion with you about. And then based on the outcome of that, then we will go and evaluate the timeline for putting the procurement of these bid packages together. And then we will go ahead and solicit the bids for the furniture and install the furniture. Now, the timeline for this, even had we backed up and done it a significant amount of time, there's not enough time to provide all new furniture when we are ready to turn over Presumpscot. But part of our desire to wait is to understand exactly how much funding we're going to have so that we can consider equity and not just go spend a bunch of funds on the Presumpscot school without understanding how it impacts Longfellow and Reiki. And so right now, part of our assessment of what you have for furniture is also to look at, to make sure that as we turn over new spaces, that we have solutions, even if they're temporary, to furnish all spaces. So I will pause for a moment. I think there are some questions.
Go ahead, Annie.
I just wanted to clarify, is Reiki are we planning on getting all new furniture for Reiki for the new classrooms?
I don't know the answer to that yet. I don't know that we haven't just gone through to look at evaluate all of the furniture and its condition. So that's the very first step that we need to do.
Okay, I just wanted to remind the group that Reiki came in $4 million under budget and Presumpscot came in $4 million over budget. So our money was taken and given to Presumpscot. And then our contractors came back with, $800 something thousand saying, we need this contingency money. And that was subtracted from the furniture. And now we're losing, we're just losing out. And I just wanted to point that out to the group.
I need to step in on this, Annie, because I think that, this is a three-school BLAC for a reason, because we have had to look at these projects as connected to each other. We have one budget that we are doing our best to be able to spread it out among the three schools. So I think the whole point of what Mark just said was we need to wait until we know what the projects are going to come in as. There is the possibility, hopefully unlikely, that, along the way we find something else that's significantly going to impact our contingency costs. And then it's going to come out of the only place that it can come out of. And then that is our FF&E, and there's going to be even less. So, and at the end of the day, To do anything other than what we're proposing to do means that we are going to have to change the scope of work, decrease the scope of work at one of the schools in order to be able to accomplish that. And so I just want to remind everyone that these projects are all connected to each other and have been from day one. And, the fact that we did the three together was because we were concerned that if we didn't do it that way, that the last school would not have any money to be able to do the school. So that's why we did it. So I think it's really important for us to just remember that there isn't anybody who's getting cheated. We had to dip into the reserves, to the tune of $800,000 for Reiki. So, it's not like there hasn't been adjustments made to the overall project in order to be able to support the schools as they've come in. Presumpscot came in higher than what we expected it to be. That's, and Reiki came in lower. And that was great for the project overall. And, we couldn't have done it if we weren't looking at the three projects together.
You want to speak, Angie?
Yeah, I just want to, I'll put my hand down, I guess now. I hear you, Annie. I didn't want you to know that. But what I'm also hearing is that the money won't be spent till the end of the project. And I think yours takes the longest. So therefore, no furniture for anyone until then. And I also want to point out that all of us got a bunch of new furniture through the COVID money. So I actually think when we go to take a look, for instance, evaluate Presumpscot, we had 2 new preschool, pre-K classrooms that we've already purchased new items for, and desks. And then I also want to say to Lisa, Liz, that the technology is separate. It will be going up. So that is something, all the projectors will be going up at Presumpscot either at the end of this week or sometime next week. So those will be in place in every classroom. So I think, Annie, it's all going to work out in the end, because I actually don't think we're going to need as much as other people are going to need.
And those projectors have been ordered, that order is already being made for all of the schools.
And can I just add one other thought? Just in hearing what you're sharing, Annie, and that it's been difficult all along to try to make sure that each of the projects stay on track the best we can, and also just thinking about the 2 years of COVID and the costs and the construction, just things haven't gone as planned and expected, right, for lots of reasons. So I think we have that piece too that has added another layer of chaos at times, or unknown, that I think everyone's done a lot of work to try to manage the best as possible. But I do just agree that prioritizing getting all 3 projects in the scope that were planned done as best as possible has been the priority, and I am hopeful that that piece of FF&E will work out. But I do hear what you're saying, and have had concerns over the process about the buildings all getting that done. So just hear what you're saying, and also feel hopeful that it's going to work out like Angie said. So thanks. Anybody else have questions before we move on from the FF&E piece? Okay, Mark.
Great. So the next step is really thinking about the immediate timeline of where we are, what we have coming up for meetings. It's been, again, wonderful to reconnect with everyone. It has been a long time. It feels like before we've discussed the progress of the project. With respect to the transfer of funds, just an update on that one. So that had its first reading on August 16th with the school board. And then it was the same recommendation that we reviewed with you folks was reviewed last week with the DABC. And right now, scheduled vote on the recommendation happens September 6th with the school board. The next DABC meeting, the September meeting, is the 3rd Thursday in September. That's the 15th. And our next scheduled meeting is the 4th Thursday, and that's September 22nd. So we'll have an update. Again, we can take a look at what we spent for contingency at that point and kind of give you an update of where we were tracking and where we are now. We'll also have some updates on how we're doing with the construction progress, and also further our conversation about FFE. And so that is what we had for everyone tonight. I'll stop sharing and
just on that last slide, I don't know that we mentioned that the DABC met last week and approved the transfer. So that is what's going in front of the board on Tuesday the 6th.
Great. And so I'll turn it back over to Aura.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for the great engagement and questions. And just, want to reiterate that there will be ongoing opportunities. I think as we're making these next decisions about priorities for each building, us as a BLAC will get to have to weigh in on that, and, but through communicating with each school community kind of about priorities. So just want everybody to, stay engaged in that next step. Any other last thoughts or questions before we end a few minutes early tonight? All right. Thanks, everybody. It looks like we just need someone to make a motion to adjourn. Anybody?
So moved.
All right. Anybody second? Laura seconds. And everybody in favor? All right. We're adjourning at 7:21. Thanks again, everyone. Enjoy your last bits of summer and have a good start to your school year. See you soon.